Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. This is episode number 45, and today we will be reviewing, I believe, a 2019 film titled Honey Boy that is based off of the life of actor Shia LaBeouf, infamous actor, because he's been in the news for, I would say, the last decade and a half for a lot of weird controversies and a lot of movies he's also been in. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. How I actually found out about this film was I was just skimming through my Amazon Prime video catalog, and this was one of the recommended films, and I was like, "This is interesting." I had no idea what Honey Boy was about, um, but I decided to watch a little bit, and Shia LaBeouf is one of the actors in the movie as well. So then I read a little bit about it after and realized it was actually based on his life. So that brought a little more context to the film. Kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, this film, it's I think produced by Amazon Prime Studios.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I actually heard of this film that I knew was about Shia LaBeouf's life. Like, if just to give the audience, I mean, they probably know, but he's had an up and down career in many ways. He kind of, he's been in, like, I remember that movie Holes. That was the
Yeah,
he started out with. He's been in Transformers. He's been in a lot of some blockbusters and also niche classics. And he's also done some serious. He also did some serious acting. And like what ended up happening is that like I didn't know at the time, right? This became, once he got back from rock bottom, he started opening up about this. And this film, I think, is part of that process. That like he had a lot of issues, psychological, mental issues that he was suppressing because when you're in the midst of, fame and having a career, sometimes you get lost in that whirlwind. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting film, a lot to, break apart and talk about thematically. But yeah, I mean, it's sometimes they say like for artists, like they have to like use their art as a mechanism to, find themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And part of the reason I wanted to like talk about this film, I think this is something that when you see a lot of actors sort of acting out, or actors and actresses acting out in weird ways, you don't really know what their sort of upbringing with like Hollywood is just a weird industry in and of itself, especially for like child actors. And you often see like a lot of crazy things, or like you kind of wonder, why are they acting out this way? And sort of brings context is like you don't know the environment that they sort of grew up in, and how they were pushed in certain ways, and so they could be rebelling. They could have been abused by either family members or part of like the directing cast or whatever else, right? I mean, there's a reason why I say the Me Too movement came about, right? There was a lot of abuse within Hollywood, so it's just interesting seeing sort of the upbringing of Shia LaBeouf and how that really did play a part, because obviously that led to a lot of his psychological issues, and sort of explains why he acted out in very weird ways over the years.
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll raise real quickly is one is I think this is even goes beyond like actors, right, or his story, right? Like you often when you interact with people, like we know each other very well because we've known each other for 15 years, but like there's people I meet, like especially now that I live in New York City, that like I have to remind myself that like maybe they have their own, like you once told me, like everybody's got their own like issues, and you don't know their life story concretely, and like sometimes that's why I have to like be patient, like. Just because somebody blows me off, like what I've learned is like, you just don't take things personally. It's like, them that well and they're trying to hurt you. But like some people just have their own thing. And I think, that's something that I got away from this film. The second thing that I think this film touches upon a little bit, but I think other media has captured it more, is that like, we forget that like when you're an underage actor, there are child labor laws, and there's also the juggling between this aspirational career and being a kid, just a kid, right? There's school, but also like the socialization of like your friends and like being a child, and they often don't get that, right? We see this a lot with Disney stars, right? Like Miley Cyrus and others, and Hannah Montana, or that show, right? Like they're on a big show that's popular, and their parents are probably really invested, and they don't get to be a kid, right? They don't get to just be in school regularly. They don't just get to be. It's like they're working before like most kids are even thinking about the concept of work.
Well, it's like, oh man, and So we're going to be talking about a lot of like complex issues within this, and so we'll bring up a lot of examples, and
Michael
like a
Jackson's
lot of it
another
is just speculation. That's exactly where I was going, right? So like part of what like if you talk about like with like the case of Michael Jackson, right? He didn't really have a childhood, and like it's been like brought up a lot because he was part of the Jackson Five growing up in Gary, Indiana, and it's well known that his dad worked them to like death in practicing like music, their musical numbers, trying to make them the best musicians. That they didn't really have time to just be themselves growing up. And so because of that, like it's not that surprising that he acted out in such weird ways. I mean, he built his own sort of ranch, right? That's very infamous called Neverland, based off like the Peter Pan. Part of why I would speculate is because he was trying to reclaim that childhood that he never really had. And so it's interesting sort of seeing the pressures that are placed onto them as kids and how that really messes people up in the long run.
Yeah, I concur.
In this, yeah, and you see this all over with. I think it was just really interesting, or one of the interesting aspects that like I found with this film is Shia LaBeouf played his dad, who was very abusive, and in a way he took advantage of him and was profiting off of his son's success. And you see this a lot in Hollywood too, and it's interesting, I guess, because I never grew up as like a child actor or entertainer. It was interesting seeing how that might affect you in seeing that like your family members are in a way taking advantage or trying to profit off your success. And you see this within the case recently of like Britney Spears, where her family members were sort of taken in charge of her, and she was like they basically controlled her life and every move. I forgot what exactly the term was for that kind of arrangement. But yeah, and it turns out that there was a lot of crap going on, and it's not surprising that Britney Spears has acted out in such weird ways over the years as well. You see this all over in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's a well documented because it's a more modern phenomenon, but it's become more well documented. Like, parents are, and we'll talk about this probably as a theme in the movie, right? Parents have a huge impact on their kids.
Sure.
But like,
I'm sure we'll draw a lot of parallels to one of your favorite shows, Chris, BoJack.
Of course, dude. That's one of my favorite shows of all time. I mean, people say it's too dark, but I say it's the right amount of darkness. Anyways, I mean, it's because like if you think about it, right, like, and this is going back to actually part of my growth experience, just being in this city for just less than a year, even is that like, people they don't handle success or fame really well, right? And I think for parents of Michael Jackson or Britney Spears or Tiger Woods is another example, right? That dad was all over the kid, right, to be great, because they end up basically living through their kids because they felt like they never achieved what they should have achieved, or like they don't have that gift or ability, And it's very dangerous when like you're trying to live through other people. Just like you always mentioned to me, like you don't seek validation from others. You also shouldn't try to
shouldn't anyway.
You shouldn't try to live your dreams through other people too, And I think people do that with their kids a lot.
Oh yeah, it's especially child actors.
Yeah, or like athletes too. Like Tiger Woods is the other example that I saw the documentary, which I highly recommend. Really good. And yeah, you see a dad that it's probably the same archetype of like, my son is only going to have time for golf and that's it.
Yeah, who was the other? I mean, there was a very extreme case of this.
The USC.
He was a former former USC quarterback. Man, his life was utterly micromanaged to an insane degree. Where even when he went to, and he was his dad was a former NFL player, and he was just trying to groom him to be the perfect athlete. Maranovich or something like that. Well, I think it was
Maranovich or something like that.
Guy's last name. But yeah, it was to such a degree that when he went over as a child to other kids, like birthday parties, he couldn't eat the cake. He had to bring his own personal like cake that was made for him. It was just nuts. And in the end, what ended up happening is Maranovich, because he was so sheltered, once he got to college into the pros, he just didn't know how to cope. And
he started smoking weed and stuff. Yeah,
smoking weed, getting into a lot of problems.
And this happens a lot. Like I one of my favorite biographies, sports biographies, is Pistol Pete, the basketball player. Mm-hmm. Same deal. Like his dad was a coach. Like this is back in the 40s and 50s, but he was a college coach. I don't know. NBA wasn't really a thing back then, but like he would have him all the time practice basketball. Actually, when his son was like middle school, he had other coaches come by to see his son, and this guy was dramatic. He's like, "I have something to show you." and he opens the garage, and the room is dark, but they hear this bouncing. This kid was dribbling 2 balls basically in the dark, blindfolded, like perfectly, you know, like that's like his son was a machine. But the problem is that in the book, it explores how like he ended up becoming an alcoholic and other things, because once he got to like up, you know, kept moving up, you know, what's the term? Like like you said, like when the structure becomes more about you and less about like, you know, I'm in this, you know, military type, my dad's like dominating me, that like he couldn't handle it, and like, you know, he chased the girls and the alcohol, and it destroyed him. I mean, he died like pretty young. And what's crazy, it's a great book because it's tragic, but what you see is like, like even though you would think that he, like on the surface he's, you know, supremely gifted, like, you know, there is something unhealthy about that. And I think you know,
no balance.
It is, yeah, it's not just no balance, but like it's unhealthy because you see that it's always a fine line. Because, sorry, I want to get back to the movie, because I read the Kobe Bryant autobiography, and his dad wasn't like that. But Kobe, when he was in Italy or in here in Philly, like it was actually kind of similar. Like he didn't really socialize with other kids. He was actually a loner. Even when I read about early Laker years when he was a rookie, they say he was like a loner because all he cared about was like basketball. The thing is that like, here's the difference, I think. And I think this is my interpretation, is that unlike Pistol Pete, Kobe, like he wanted that. Like he said, like, I want this. I'll do whatever it takes.
When I read the same thing with MJ, dude.
Yeah. When Pistol Pete, when I read that, I felt like I never got the sense that like he's like, oh, I want to be the greatest player like ever. That's my goal, right? It just felt like this was something that his dad, he thought he could have the connection with him with to do, and like every kid wants that with their parents, right? And over time, that was working, right? He reached, you know, he still has the record for like, you know, points per game in collegiate history without the 3-point line. But once he got to the pros, which is like you have to have even more discipline because there's even more temptation, he couldn't. And I think that's
But it's crazy. It's kind of like the Rodman effect, right? Where they show Rodman in the 90s like being such a superstar and celebrity, and everyone is just throwing themselves at you, and there's temptation everywhere. And if you don't know how to have that self-restraint, you're just going to be in a whirlwind of making bad decisions.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah. Some people have that self-restraint, and in the case like Pistol Pete, sounds like he didn't.
Yeah. No. Yeah. He didn't. And I think it's easy to say like, oh, he should have had the self-restraint like MJ or something. But like, I also feel like reading that book, and also with the Honey Boy, we'll come back to, is that like it's easy to say that, but like until you have those temptations, you don't really know, right? Like off camera, you mentioned like if I had like, you know, 5 supermodels pining at me, would I be able to show restraint? I don't really know.
Well, I mean, we don't know. The reason I was talking about that is that it goes back to that point about I think Bill Burr made that skit years ago where he's talking about how, you know, when all of the controversy came out with Tiger Woods, back to Tiger Woods, right, where he cheated on his wife, and you had everyone judging him, right? And I'm not saying he made the right decision, but it's like, and Bill Burr's point was like, dude, you don't know what it's like to be Tiger Woods because you've never had everyone trying to throw themselves at you, and you don't know how you would be able to handle that self-restraint or not, right? So how are you judging him when you've never been in that position? It made sense from a comedic standpoint, and that was sort of like the broader point.
I agree. Yeah, so we haven't actually talked about the film per se. So going back to the movie.
Yeah.
So obviously it opens up with I'm confused because they don't use their real names.
Otis. Otis is the movie star.
Yeah, so it opens up with Otis and how his fall from grace, right? Like he's having a lot of alcohol, a lot of random sex, and like, you know, I'm skipping a lot of minor details. Right. But yeah, a lot of details, but he hits rock bottom, right? Like he ends up in a car accident. And then he's forced to go through a program. And then it's, you know, therapy. Basically a program, right? It's therapy, but it's like a full program, right? Like there's not just a therapist he's working with, right? So in like that, let's talk about like that first third. How did you think the movie handled that? And like, did you maybe, because again, like what's interesting with these kind of movies is because if you know a little bit about like the actor or the story, like they don't have to explain as much. Because I did feel like there were some times where like they kind of assumed you kind of knew what this movie was going to be about, especially in the beginning. Which
we did, and I thought it worked well, right? Because
I was just curious to get your thoughts on that. Yeah,
I thought it was good. I mean, this movie goes back in between sort of flashbacks. So you have like sort of present day, and it's a really struggling movie star who's dealing with addiction, of all types, and it culminates with him basically. He gets into a car crash, and as part of his sort of rehab process, he has to go to has to go to rehab and has to go to therapy. It's pretty much what it is. So it's a full program, and they basically start revisiting the past or like his struggles as to like why he has PTSD. And then you go back to the point where he was a childhood working as a child actor, sort of a decade plus earlier, and you start to see really the influence that his dad has. And his dad is a very interesting character, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him quite a bit. And it's interesting because it's played. The dad is played by Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I thought it worked well in the context of this movie. And yeah, I was kind of curious as to what you thought about Shia LaBeouf playing the dad. Like, how did you think he did? And it's just interesting, that sort of process, because I'm sure that must have been a little difficult for him to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's what one of the more fascinating things I found about the movie is like he plays his dad, but it's one of those things where this happens with actors when they play historical figures, right? They're doing their best, but if you really think about it, they're portraying
their interpretation of them.
What their interpretation is, whether that's a historical figure or him and his dad. Like the only person who could really play his dad is his dad. And that's like something that hit me during this movie. I was just like,
but at the same time, would the dad be truthful or try to present himself in a better way?
Exactly.
That's hard too.
That's a hard one, right? But I think it's fine for this film because the film isn't about, even at the end. Okay, skipping a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's all perspective, right?
Yeah, he says, I'm making a film about you. But I really think that's a bit wrong. I think Shia LaBeouf was trying to make a film about how he perceived the relationship with his dad. And I think that's the more important thing to take away. I don't know if he's 100% factual, like that's exactly how he was, or if that's who he always is. But I think how he perceived that relationship is probably more important than how, like you said, the dad viewed himself, or like you said, the only person who could be him really is himself, right? Mm-hmm. But I think, like that's how people interact with each other, right? Like our perception of each other is like, it might be how you perceive me. Yeah, how you perceive me might be completely different how I perceive myself, and like that is, that is your perception versus my, like, and vice versa is the same, right? So yeah, I think that was an interesting aspect, like you said, to your question of this film, because there's just no way he can 100% be him, because he's also, it's an acting job. It's never 100%, but I think we see enough of how that relationship was to understand why Otis or Shia LaBeouf like had these issues growing up and as an adult. It's kind of fascinating to your point.
It was fascinating, and I'm sure, like, given sort of the dynamic of how that relationship came across in the movie, like if you had a childhood like that'd be pretty hard because I'm sure that brought up a lot of memories. So I'm sure by the time Shia had made this movie, he's gone through therapy enough to where he's sort of come to terms with all this, or maybe this is part of his therapeutic process. Because there was a lot of stuff there that even if it's like a fraction true, right? That's a lot to deal with growing up. Yeah,
an interesting aspect. Another aspect I like a little thread I liked in this film is that his dad is, what's his name again? James. Otis's dad, James. Otis says, like, my dad goes to AA meetings, but he mix and matches like stories that he's heard to make himself like fit in. And I remember a quote I was told once. I was young, I was a teenager. I was told once, like, I think it says a lot about this person's how they perceive the world and act. But he told me, Chris, what matters sometimes is not if it's true or not, whether you believe it to be true or not. And I was just like, and the context here was kind of like, if you need to fudge a story to make it seem better, or to just make it work, like in the social context, or to impress somebody or whatever, it's not 100% bad as long as you believe it to be true, or like you believe it to be true. It was a very interesting comment. I've always gone back to it. And so when saw that scene where Otis is saying, like, yeah, my dad doesn't even say his own true stories. He takes the best ones he's heard and like mix and matches it, so you don't even know what's real. I think
there's
there's a
sort of blurred
danger.
reality there.
Yeah, there's a danger in that. I think I understand saying little things so you're not like, you keep a conversation going, but you should never really believe like a false narrative, right? You should understand your story and embrace your story. I've learned to reject that advice, but that's only come with maturity in my late 20s versus like thinking like, oh, this is, something that works, because maybe it works for that person, but it doesn't work for me. So,
Sure.
but it's just that scene, that whole sequence reminded me of that. I was just like, oh, you know what? There are people that think that way. They're like, oh, like it doesn't matter what's true as long as what I say seems true. Like that's what matters, is the perception, not the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this movie was good on many levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good because it talks about Hollywood, childhood trauma, and trying to cope with difficult upbringings. So yeah, I thought it was good overall because it explains a lot about sort of like Hollywood in general, I would say. Because I'm sure like this story is not necessarily that unique if you probably look at all the upbringings of actors and actresses.
Yeah. Okay, so going back a little bit now after the beginning, what did you think of like that whole dynamic with the big brother Tom and his dad James and stuff? That seemed like that was not new too, because that's the whole like father male figure in a kid's life. But that was him throwing into the pool. I was just like, wow, like that guy's unhinged.
Yeah, it was very unhinged, and I think that was sort of the point. I mean, that it's tough, right? Because you're talking about cycles, and you can tell the dad has been through a lot, right? Because he was also a Vietnam vet. That's brought up a lot. So he had his own PTSD, and the way he acted out towards his kid led to his kid developing his own PTSD, right? And so you could see like this is not a great environment for the child Otis growing up, and his dad really can't be the type of father figure fully that Otis really needs to thrive, and that's why he's like has his big brother, right? And the big brother is supposed to be sort of this positive influence that looks after him, takes him to games, but then the dad James feels a type of way because he's like, I'm the real dad, and then he's like, you're coming in here and trying to like take my job, and so he lashes out at him and tells him not to, he's like, you're not his dad's, don't come back here, right? But in the end, right, he like James was selfish because if he was doing the right thing or what was best for his kid, he would have let that guy sort of be a good figure for his son, but he didn't. He didn't swallow his pride, and instead he lashed out, and he thought more about himself than his kid.
Yeah, pride is another theme in this film, right? Because there's a scene where he says like, "Don't cry in front of me." There's many little scenes where like he's like it's this out of control. I like using the term machismo, but like this like, oh, don't cry in front of me, and like you gotta be tough, and you gotta like all this stuff that I guess like leads to problematic behavior because you're not able to just be like, emotionally vulnerable or just express some emotions, which is healthy at times.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you go to two extremes, but so on the Tom thing, right? Because connecting it to the Big Brother thing, apparently it's the mother's idea to get Otis into the Big Brother thing.
Sure.
What do you think of the mother's role? Because there's some scenes we never see her, but there's some interesting scenes with like her.
You don't really know. I mean, she's not present, right? The movie is not focused on their relationship, so you don't really know what's going on. You assume, right, they're divorced or not seeing each other, whatever. It's not really. You just don't really know her and her son's relationship, but I can't say she was a great figure either because while she tried to do some good things, right, and having the big brother trying to help her be have more of a positive. Try to get a positive role model for her son by having that big brother around her son. She also, at one scene, I believe, is trying to communicate to the dad via the son, and because of that, you're sort of manipulating your child into a bad position, and then it becomes like an outrageous fight where the son is in between the parents arguing. That's not a good position to put your kid in. Right. And so, it was just not a healthy situation. So I can't say she was a great figure as well.
Yeah, that scene to me it was probably put there because he wanted to convey that like he had no luck, Otis or Charlotte. Well, I'm gonna just say
No,
Otis for the rest of the pod. Like
clearly
no luck
not.
because both, even the mom, right? Like she's not really around in the picture. Even if the dad's the focus, right? There's other movies I can pick for our future episodes where like it's the same kind of talking points, like separated parents, and like basically what I'm trying to say is like how he chose to do the portrayal, even though it's focused on the dad a lot. The absence of the mother, I think, also speaks a lot.
100%.
And I think like that phone call is the encapsulation of like their relationship is so poor that they can't even talk to each other. They have to talk through him, which is never good.
Mm-hmm. So I did want to ask, because it's more of a tough scene. What did you think about the dynamic between Otis and Shy Girl?
This is the neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I found intriguing because it was a bit.
It was a little weird, but
unconventional.
I mean, it's a weird environment, so
yeah, unconventional. Yeah. Like I thought, like so. I'll give you my raw thoughts. My raw thoughts were like, are they going down this route of like this kid's gonna start, But they didn't go that far. It did seem like what that relationship was more like, because we don't know. Again, like you said, they focus on Otis's story and the dad. So we don't know like the story of this girl or like all the other minor characters.
Dude, they're in a like permanent motel. I'm sure they all have their own.
Having stayed in one for a week, I'll tell you that it's.
Bro, I've been in motels all over. You meet some interesting folks.
Yeah. I suspect that they both needed that emotional. How do I say this? Like that emotional
support in a way.
Nourishment,
connection.
Yeah, I was gonna say nourishment, and they got it through each other. But it, like you said, this also leads to. So no, it's not just weird, but it's also still unhealthy because I'll maybe off camera I'll tell you, but I was catching up with a friend and she was telling me how like her friend, not
their own dynamic.
No, like he is involved with the woman and it's so obvious that he's codependent. Like that kind of like what Otis has with that Shy Girl is like could evolve into codependency because they clearly have issues, both of them.
Oh,
now we don't see it beyond this film, but right, that's already what you see. Like it's unhealthy, even though it's like this, like the small little, like these are the small moments of like actual, kind of like not nice moments, but like kind of like calm and like, there's so much, anxiety and pressure, like just like the breaks, but like in reality, this is still not good either. Mm-hmm. Like the whole movie is actually a lot of bad, like that's why he's in therapy in the end, right? And why he's hit rock bottom, because
there's a reason he's diagnosed with PTSD.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I would say that the dynamic was, like you said, weird. I called it unconventional earlier. I think it's on purpose, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm saying anything that you don't agree with, but I'm I'll let you.
It's just weird because, like, I mean, it's a strange environment, but Shy Girl is clearly older than him. He's a minor, and you don't know if she's just like emotionally manipulating him. Like, it's weird, right? Because you don't know her story. And then there's such a big age difference, and if it leads to anything more, is like very weird.
Very weird, yeah.
Borderline. Well, no, it is predatory, but yeah.
Yeah, because she looks like what, like 17, 16, and he's like 10,
maybe 18. We don't know.
Borderline, right? But she doesn't look like 30.
No. But it's still weird. There's a clear age difference.
Yeah. No, it's still hella weird. No, it's still very unconventional and weird. Yeah, it's But I think it's in there for that reason, right? I think you're supposed to feel weirded out.
Yeah, uncomfortable. Yeah. No, I agree. I'm trying to think. Oh, so what did you think about the point where Otis actually starts to tell his dad off? He actually musters like the courage to like say what's on his mind. Do you know what I'm talking about, or do you remember?
Yeah, you're talking about like the scene where it ends with like him saying like, "If you want lessons from me, if you can hit your boss once, you can hit him twice." That was a powerful scene. I don't know if this scene's before that or after that, but what I was going to ask, like, we can jump.
Go ahead. No.
But I was going to ask about like, what did you think of the dynamic with the camp counselor, right? The guy in the pool, and then he tells him to go scream in the forest. Which I'm curious what you thought of about that. Why did he tell him to do that? And like, is this?
I think a lot of it was like he's kept so much in over the years that you got to find ways to sort of have an outlet to let it out, to actually be able to start dealing with emotions that he clearly hasn't had like ever processed. And I don't know if this is an effective technique or not. I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was just curious if you happen to know.
I just think it was a technique that he's like, you need to try something.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could see if it's an actual technique is that, like, unlike, let's say, hurting other people emotionally or going to substance abuse, this is probably like, right, yelling into the forest is probably the safest thing that you do versus like self-harming or like, you know.
I mean, when things aren't going wrong, I've heard of people say, "Man, I wish there was like a scream room."
Yeah,
and I'm sure there is a bit of therapeutic.
Well, this is why those things are really popular, right? Like they call them break rooms, right? Like you just give you a baseball bat, and they give you a helmet, and you just break something for an hour.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen Office Space, right?
Yeah,
they just decide to beat the crap out of like technology because it's the frustration of like the white collar workers.
Now, jumping to the scene, you described one of the better scenes. Yeah, that was the kid finally telling his dad what he thought, right? Like, you know, and the dad basically, again, showing him who's boss, you know.
That was brutal though. But the dad he was basically told him, he's like, "You're nothing. I employ you. You're my employee." There was a little kid telling his dad that, and he's not wrong, but it was just brutal because you just see the resentment going both ways there.
Yeah, that
was a tough scene.
It's one of the better scenes in the film, but yeah, one of the more brutal ones because, like, you know, honestly, I didn't see that coming with if you can hit him once, you can hit him twice. If your boss lets you get away with it, because he calls him boss, like you said, it's a whole employer dynamic, right? He's doing a play on,
which is also like a family dynamic, which is intertwined as a family dynamic, right? So role reversal in a way. That was a good scene. I thought that might have been the best scene in the movie. I'm trying to think. What was there? Are there any other scenes that sort of came to mind from this film that you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think. There's definitely the ending I want to talk about. Because that's a good scene. Oh, what did you think of the moments with him and the Dr. Moreno, right? With the whole wristband and everything. What did you think about those scenes? I thought those scenes were good.
Remind me again. I can't quite remember that specific scene you're talking about.
It was the doctor that.
Oh, that's like. Again, yeah, I mean, these are some techniques that are used that might be used for therapeutics, and I'm just not aware of.
It's to control his anger, I think, right? I'm trying to remember too, because I'm not really in this field. I'm not the therapist.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something to help him cope, and there might be some psychological reason. I don't know if that's like necessarily the healthiest. I'm not aware of the literature, but it seems to me like when you see it, right, he's just like constantly flicking the wrist. I don't know if that gives some sort of outlet, but it reminds me a lot of like when you hear people sort of cutting themselves for relief, right? Because it's like you're doing a little bit of damage to yourself. Maybe it's a way of sort of getting that effect without actually damaging yourself.
Yeah. Also, it could, like you said, it could be one of those things where, you know, they have like people have those certain like techniques of like they link their like an emotion or memory to an action. You know, it could be like that.
Well, yeah, I think that might also be like why stress balls are used a lot to try to help people cope. It's like you're just letting out this like this action of like tension.
Yeah. So yeah, let's. If there's anything else, I do want to talk. I think the ending is also.
We can talk about the ending. I mean, really, there's not a ton of scene. Like, it's just a dynamic between a child actor and his dad, really, and that's what it is. It's not a super complicated movie in terms of storyline, but a lot of the themes are very deep.
Yeah, so, I mean that ending sequence. I was gonna ask if you thought that was real or not, and
it might be the marijuana cannabis like scene, and then him going back to like talk to his dad. Yeah, I don't know.
Dreamlike, but then like it seemed kind of real too. So
I thought it was a good ending. I thought it was more dreamlike. I think it's something he wishes he could have to have like closure in his mind. That's what's playing out. But I'm not sure if that necessarily happened in real life.
Yeah, because the scene is not complicated, like you said. It's him as a clown. The reason I thought it was kind of fake is he's like a clown. He's in a clown thing, and he's like doing his trick, and Otis is just walking over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That last scene where he just wants, I think that closure. Right? I think because we don't even know if the guy's alive or not, right? But he tells him like You know, I'm gonna make a movie about you, and James that says like, well, at least please make me look good. You know.
Yeah, I think it was more closure than actual like a dynamic that happened in reality.
Yeah, like spiritual closure. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting scene and a great way to end the movie. Yeah, like it's kind of like that. Those last words were kind of like good.
Yeah, oftentimes a lot of movies they fail to really hit home with like a powerful ending, and this one I thought did a pretty good job. I don't know if they could have done anything to sort of end the movie in a better way.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought it was good. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to add with that last scene or not.
no, I was just curious if like you know if you thought it was real or if you thought like it was a good ending. That was the
I
only
thought it
question
was
I
a good
had.
ending. I think this is just an internal scenario that was playing in his mind, probably while he was in therapy.
I'm doing the cannabis, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably agree. I don't have a strong feelings on either. I just thought it was a good way. It was a good last few dialogues. Was I think appropriate.
Yeah. Do you want to get into final ratings?
Sure.
All right, I'll let you go first, man.
Yeah. This movie was solid. It was good. You know, one of those films that Amazon turns out that it's just just always above average. Doesn't really blow my water away. Because I have high standards. So I'm going with 7 out of 10.
Woo! A little brutal. I'm kind of curious. What were some of the things that you thought was the movie did poorly or could have done better?
Yeah, I mean, I think like
I
unfortunately,
want you to justify this 7 out of 10. You just said 7 out of 10. Didn't give any critiques.
Well, it's because this is the typical movie that's like trying to be deep, but like it uses somebody's story to hit those moments, but it didn't have the what I call the artistic form, like it didn't have like, that extra quality of of just high art, where I feel like, this scene was written so well, or like this movie's crafted in such a unique way. And so it's like, it's basically one of those films that like people nominate for awards and then it never wins an award, right? I bet you didn't win any awards.
To give context into Chris's rating, if he's not confused by the ending, you're not going to get higher than a 9 out of 10.
Or you have to be like super novel in your approach of how you make the film. I've never seen a film like this before.
I didn't understand where it was going, so it must be great. 9 out of 10. Anyway, sorry, I had to throw it in, but I'm just messing with you.
Also, I give points to films that make me deep. Like First Reform, it's not a very technically complicated film, but it made me wonder. Made me believe, like think of things I never.
Well, if it has to do with a theme of Catholic guilt, then Chris will give it at least an 8.5. But anyway, so to my rating, I thought it was very good. It was not a complicated storyline, to your point, but it really does sort of probe some themes that, really get at, or like really make you sort of understand why a lot of Hollywood actors start to like lash out or act out in really weird ways, right? This is not the first film to sort of explore this. I thought we talked about this before with BoJack Horseman. They really explore pretty deeply Hollywood culture and a lot of the weird things that really go on within Hollywood and actors. Now, I was really impressed with Shia LaBeouf's performance. I thought that was difficult, given his upbringing, playing his dad. If you have sort of a traumatic relationship with somebody, that must be really hard to do. Maybe therapeutic, but it's still impressive the way he did it and that he chose to even do it. Maybe it was part of his therapeutic process. Either way, I thought that was really interesting, and I give him a lot of credit for that. I thought the child actor did very well in the movie. I can't criticize his performance. And I thought there were some pretty powerful scenes between like the son and dad, especially when they both come to terms. And they basically have some very brutal moments. Personally, there's nothing I would say that I wasn't necessarily wowed, but there was a couple of like powerful punches. I'd probably give this movie about an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, to explain Alexis's rating system, he's too lenient.
Go ahead.
Too lenient, like some wow moments. Come on, you gotta have that high bar. You gotta start becoming a snob.
It was good. No, I'm fairly consistent. The only clear regret that I remember was only for Absentia. That thing. In retrospect, I would have given that a 4.5 or a 5 out of 10.
0 out of 10. Anyways, the
you were kind. You gave it a 3.5.
I know I was also like, I don't want to rip it too much, but I should have given it a 0 or a 1. But yeah, I think that concludes this episode. You know, please like and subscribe. You know, it's interesting. Just yeah, I think we could keep this on air. You know, I was looking at the analytics, and you know, we're kind of trending the same. Like it seems like we get the same kind of view count and stuff. So it's, we do have probably different people, but we do have an audience, even though it's a small one.
Probably a 3-person audience. Like, oh, let's see what these dudes want to talk about this week.
Probably.
Yeah, who knows? It's more like we enjoy just talking about different films, and if other people enjoy watching it, I mean, more power to it. We hope some people take a little bit out of what we talk about. But anyway, I think that concludes it for this week. If you enjoyed our commentary for this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel, and let us know if you want us to review a specific movie that you have in mind. Just mention that down in the comments below, and we'll be sure to check that out. So until next week, stay tuned.